For the first time in my life, I'm truly free to see the clear-cut forest for the poison sea, to see the waters occupy the shores of Jersey, and I feel alive.
Alright, hello, welcome back to Calfire Crackpots. My name is Eris, and here we are talking about Western droughts since the last ice age. How are you this
Yes,
morning?
I'm doing pretty good. Waking up surprisingly well. You know, it's that time of year where you're cold in your house and uh do you have that happen to you?
It's that time of year where I need to wake up early, because what happens is around 8:30, I just get so tired that I'm just like, I need to go to bed, and then I end up waking at like 4:30.
Yeah. It's darker earlier. The seasonal depression is setting in.
It is.
I find a lot that in these weird transitional months before the AC is full blast or the heat is full blast,
hmm
it just kind of like it tends to be colder hot,
hmm
like
Yeah, I
uncomfortably
feel that.
so.
Because like it's not I'm colder now than I would be in like the middle of winter, like February or something, because then I'm kind of adjusted to it.
Yeah, and that's also like, I mean, on top of, 50-degree day hitting different than it would in spring,
Yeah.
I the temperature alternates still in between hot and cold, so we don't really use the heat fully yet.
Yeah, because like, you can have something like last week where it was like 70 degrees for the entire week.
Yeah,
And then immediately, like now it's gonna be like 40s, 30s until like December.
even depending on the year, getting
Yeah.
into winter, sometimes there's just one warm day that screws it up.
hmm But we're here to talk about
Yes, we're here to
uh,
talk about Western US
the
droughts
the best coast.
and the
W-
best coast.
What's the deal with it?
The best coast, subjective, highly so.
I found this hat.
No coat. Oh, what does that say?
Midwest, no coast.
Sweet.
Well, they call it the third coast.
It's a fake coast. That's like
Yeah,
saying,
like they call like the whole Michigan coast the third coast. It's just like they call Chicago like the second city or the Paris of America, which I don't get at all.
that's like saying Salt Lake City is a Bay Area town. That's just not true.
Yeah, that is false. It's like, yes, Sacramento, the most eastern city in the Bay Area.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's ridiculous.
so what do we got there? We have ports. We have no
We do have
water.
ports. We have a lot of infrastructure
No water.
and lack of water.
Yes. So let's go back in time. All right, will you step into my time machine
Hmm.
to the Pleistocene epic ice age? I don't know how it's pronounced.
Epoch, I usually think.
All right, thank you, apes. 10,000 BP, meaning before present. I saw it on Wikipedia and I was like, that might be a better way of saying it than like 8,000 BCE.
Yeah.
So this is the Ice Age. This is important to notice. This is not, and I can't stress this enough, not the continent where the Ice Age movies took place.
Hmm.
That's
Really?
somewhere in Eurasia.
Okay.
Okay, so this is maybe might have been before this, but when it's most likely that the first humans came into North and South America, land bridge up there, and basically all of Canada and most of the Midwest was tundra and an ice sheet.
Okay.
And the thing that I find most interesting is look around the East Coast. Like the US is like a little bit fatter,
Oh
like
yeah.
especially Florida.
Huh.
Uh, like Tampa, it's basically just all land. And then, California's a bit bigger. The East Coast, though, is like a lot larger. So ignoring this vertical red line upward and global temperature anomalies, let's notice about 8,000 BCE how that temperature was super low, going back further than that. Yeah, so and in the western US, it really meant the climate was just colder than it was. It wasn't strictly speaking an ice sheet. Although really interesting, Nevada basically all forested with many lakes,
Oh, interesting.
and Utah being mostly lakes too. Huh.
It looks like Middle America is pretty unchanged.
Yeah, yeah, I'm assuming that it was probably colder overall.
Oh yeah, of course.
Um, it is the Ice Age. We'll get
In
into this a
terms
bit.
of climate, in terms of climate sort of descriptors, though, you're probably only just gonna find the same things.
We'll get into this a bit more on our series coming up about sea level rise,
Oh,
but it is very possible that there may be like with climate, anything related to climate, it's hard to tell because things can just happen so irregularly. But all of the fresh water coming into the ocean may disrupt ocean currents in such a way that eventually it'll lead to another ice age, at least a
quite
smaller
interesting
one.
thought.
Yeah, we'll get into that more, talking about like Gulf Stream stoppage or whatever. But so you think that we're in a hard time now? We've had a drought going on for about 2 years, mega drought for about 20. This drought was about 3,000 years long.
Yeah,
So yeah, stop your whining.
people in California are just not ready. I
Yeah,
mean, if you had
they
lived
they
through the altithermal long drought like I
they
would,
don't
then
they don't make
you
them
would
like they
just
used to.
they do not make them like they used to. I had
Yeah,
to
it's
cross a land bridge both ways to get to school.
yeah, like I started my day in the Kamchatka Peninsula, and then I had to go all the way to Lake Michigan, and then all the way back before it melted.
Yeah,
But so looking at right after the ice age, the temperature went up for about 3,000 years, and that's the epithermal long drought. And all these ice caps receded, and because of that, the sea level rose a lot, basically to where it is now. So it was about 15 or so feet, and that was enough to sink like half of what was Florida at the time.
yeah.
So that doesn't bode well for the part that remains. But yeah, rapid sea level rise, almost a logarithmic graph, shoot such that it's where it is now.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
It's a very, very fine line of where sea level can just swallow up entire nations.
It's weird in that, you look at a photo that was like just 10,000 years ago and you say like, wow, like all that land just is gone now.
Yeah.
And then 10,000 years from now, what's it going to look like?
We're not too far away from it. The entirety of the Marshall Islands is less than 6 feet above sea level.
Yeah, and the nuclear powder dome on the Marshall Islands.
Yeah.
Oh God, that thing is terrible.
I feel bad for them.
Speaking of people doing things that couldn't be justified, I watched Squid Game this weekend.
Oh, you did?
I did. Have you?
I have not. I had it spoiled for me on day one, though.
How do you have it spoiled for you? It's not really much to spoil.
Well,
Wow, the main character lives.
it's enough to like if you know who lives and who dies, a lot of the tension is taken out of it, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Bong Joon-ho right now is having a hard time wondering how many anti-capitalist movies he'll need to make before America gets the point.
Yeah.
So far we've had Snowpiercer, Parasite, and then now Squid Game, and I don't think America's gotten the point yet.
Most of the time, America, if there's something that has anti-capitalist sentiments, they tend to apply a little bit of copium and just
Always over the head.
it's such a big cope to think that Parasite wasn't about capitalism.
I never saw Parasite, but I like read a summary or something.
It was very blatantly addressing classism.
Yeah, because I know that like the really rich family, like in the really poor family, like they got in a relationship or something.
Yeah, and the whole thing is like, you know, you also see it through the movie. The rich family lives in the actually geologically higher side of town,
Mm.
and I suppose geographically, but my point is, uh, like you see the low income family's house flood, and the other family's like, oh, it's just raining. Let's play in the rain.
Yeah, you know, the climate change only affects people who can't afford to get away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, beating that over the head. So after Jeebus was born and passed on, we went to the Common Era. And so once you get to, I don't know, anything from like 2000 or so years from now, years ago, the data starts to become a lot more accurate. So
Yeah.
this is always a really interesting graph to pull up, showing soil moisture in the western U.S. In terms of like tree rings or ice cores or whatever else they're able to find, and extrapolating that over the years and looking at the historical context on how the 1900s were by far the wettest century in our record.
Hmm.
And so the main mega droughts that you need to be aware of is one in 900 and then one in about 12, 1300. And this is interesting. This is a graph of estimated Native American populations. And this graph isn't too accurate. As you can see, there's a lot of uncertainty. And around right before European contact, this like 200-year long mega drought happened, and the population went down markedly.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because at least from what I was able to read, the Pueblo populations in the Southwest U.S. Navajo depended so much upon uh like corn and other stuff grown in a relatively wet climate that when you had this relatively stable wet period for the last few hundred years, you were able to farm, and then once that stopped, you either had to move and then you died.
Yeah. It also looks like on that right graph, you see how there's a big bump around 12,500 or 10,000. A
Here,
sizable, just kind
that's
of.
I was
I'm,
gonna say that's because of the end of the ice age.
I was just about to say that's when the that correlates with the graph from a few slides ago of the temperature taking a good bump, and then by
Hmm.
yeah, that one.
Yeah, just because like you can
You can't
farm
really
now.
farm when the ground is frozen.
Yeah, that's not too good. You want to avoid that if you can.
Yeah.
So, you had, and then without, totally obvious, the native population just a straight line down after this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smallpox, but we're not talking about smallpox right now. So then going to the 20th century, which is 1900 Common Era, believe it or
Yeah.
not. So these are two interesting graphs. This is annual precipitation compared to 20th century average and annual temperature compared to 20th century average. So starting with the temperature, because that one's more obvious, temperature goes up from, blue, stable, maybe a few anomalies across the decades to where we are now. Oops, all red.
Yeah.
Yeah, well over 1 degree Celsius, and in some places 2 or 3 degrees Celsius above 20th century average. Climate change doesn't affect everyone the same. And like in some small pockets, if you zoom in some small pockets in Louisiana and Alabama and Mississippi, sometimes the average temperature goes down.
Yeah. That's an anomaly though. That shouldn't be treated as any
Yeah,
sort of
that's
norm.
for them it is. What I found more interesting is annual precipitation
It goes up quite a bit actually.
in many parts of the US. Really, I think the fairest comparison is east of the Continental Divide, because that's about right here. So
Yeah.
that means that none of the water falling on this side is going to have any impact on this side. Because
Yeah.
any water that falls west of the Continental Divide is going to end up in the Pacific, east is in the Atlantic. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, that's just what happens when you rain on the side of a mountain.
Yes, it goes down.
Goes
So
down. How simple is this?
most of the Midwest, south, northeast, precipitation goes up by over 10%. And that's very important to note is on average. Average doesn't really do much to address the very high ups and downs of climate change. So, you have really wet periods followed by really, really dry periods. Each of them does more damage than the other one.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Western US has been drier over time. But what I want to focus on is probably one of the driest periods in recent history, in the 1930s, our beloved Dust Bowl, which I've nicknamed the Thunderdome because it's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So this is our timeline. So this is just a screenshotted graph of 1931 to 1960 of rainfall. And the timeline was in 1930, 50% of crops in Arkansas failed. And then in
Wow.
1934, it was Black Sunday, so that's the worst dust storm in American history.
Yep.
And then 1936, 12 states break their temperature records. And then Louisiana experiences 115 consecutive days of 90-degree plus temperatures. That's kind of just Louisiana, though.
Yeah, they were hit particularly bad from all this.
You know, Louisiana, if you're living in Louisiana, you know what you're getting yourself into. You're getting yourself into one, your house isn't going to exist in 10 years. Or if it does, you're going to need to rebuild it every 2.
I think people in Louisiana just take out 10 separate insurance policies that no other state has because of what is it?
Like flood insurance is so expensive, just like
Flood,
wildfire
hurricane.
insurance in like the West is super expensive too, because it's
So much
likely.
going on down there.
Yeah,
Great food though. Great food.
lovely food. We love Cajun food.
Yep.
Yeah, so what caused the Dust Bowl? It was poor agricultural policies and big drought.
Yep.
The 1930s is by the 1930s there would be a negligible, if any, impact caused by like man-made climate change.
Yeah.
So I don't attribute this to climate change, but you know, you had poor farming, so you were exposing topsoil and you were digging up prairie grass that held down the topsoil. So then when it did get dry, all the soil was just really fine powder, and then when it got windy, it did
Got
this.
kicked up.
It did.
Yeah, more or less this is sort of an agrarian crisis instead of a
Mhm.
climate one.
So the question is, we're heading into or in another mega drought that is not so much affecting the Great Plains yet, but it can. And I
Yeah.
think the best thing that we can do is our farming practices have improved quite a bit from and like keeping the soil, like avoiding soil depletion. The best thing would be to protect prairie grasses as much as possible.
Yeah, prairie grasses deliberately grow incredibly wide, complex root systems to keep the soil in place.
Hmm.
And I like to think that we've learned from our mistakes.
No,
I like to
probably not.
think that if we're ever susceptible in a large way to a dust bowl again, that
Mhm.
people will keep the soil in place.
Yeah, we like our topsoil. We don't want it to go away.
It takes a really long time to come back.
It does many moons.
Yep.
So then here we are in the 21st century. Average rainfall is all over the place. Average temperature is in hell territory. And we can get up to 80% of the United States in some type of drought at the same time. Reservoirs looking like this is the new normal. So here we are.
Yep.
And just one notable drought is the Ridge and the 2011 to 2017 drought. So I got into this a little bit a couple episodes ago, but this ridge right here was a ridge of high pressure that pushed pretty much any storm north, and it affected almost the entire West Coast for about 5 years. And it got so bad, it started looking like this.
Yeah,
This
that's
was at the height of the drought, and this is a very important distinction from that of California's current conundrum, in that the drought was affecting far more of the Central Valley than it did the Sierra Nevada mountains. And that's an important distinction because there's not really much rainfall in the Central Valley anyway, so that wouldn't really matter. And what really matters is how much drought is happening in the mountains.
that's where the reservoirs are. So if you're
Yes.
having issue even gathering water in the first place, then there's no way you're going to be able to distribute it.
Hmm. And then as the drought progressed, it affected more of Texas, the Great Plains, and then California set an all-time low precipitation record in 2013, and San Francisco had its lowest rainfall ever, 5.59 inches in the year of 2013.
Wow.
And in the 2013-2014 winter snowpacks were the lowest recorded in the last 100 years. And I mentioned this before, but in January 2014, the state cut allocations from the State Water Project to 0%. So they used that time that the canals were literally just empty to, get some resealing work done on it.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
this is empty. Just go for it.
it works.
It does. Yeah, so Sacramento and much of the Bay Area had to do mandatory water restrictions and rationing about half of their water, and over 500,000 acres in the Central Valley were fallowed in 2014. And in
That's
2015, wildfires burned about 7 million acres of forest. That was in all of the United States and Alaska, which was affected too. Which wasn't the all-time national record. That was sometime in the 80s.
yeah.
But wow.
It's incredible that over 500,000 acres of land were fallowed. I still can't even get over that.
Yeah, that was about 40% of land in the Central Valley at some point was
I
under
think,
some type of either fallowing or extreme mitigation.
yeah. So I just want to clarify just for people that might be watching this and not know what fallowing is. That's when agricultural land is deliberately, it's plowed and it's basically made ready for farming, but it's left unsown to keep its fertility up.
Yeah.
So that must have been incredibly impactful for fruit and agriculture in that time.
Yeah, it was a lot of people, I mean, you and I probably didn't know because we weren't really shopping or anything.
We weren't
But
really the age to buy
yeah,
fruits and vegetables from the Central Valley.
fruits and vegetables during the summer were harder to find.
Yeah.
And but during the winter, because most of the Colorado River, at least where the water came from, was relatively unaffected, the Imperial Valley could still get water pretty easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it all came to an end in 2017 with the wettest winter in US history, which, broke a
Yeah.
lot of dams.
There's a reason that El Nino is referred to as the miracle child.
It is the miracle child. We will not get no El Nino this year, but it looks like we might have a kind of wet winter because we're already in early November and there's substantial snowpack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just might be a milder La Nina.
Mm-hmm. That's what we want. That is what we want. We want mild things. It does not lend itself to being exciting.
Yeah.
All right. So anything else you want to go for?
Let's see. I think that covers all the pretty good key points.
Yeah. So next episode, we're gonna get into these buggers.
Yep.
Yeah, forest fires. So in my opinion, you know how like the polar bear is the like the champion, like the mascot of like sea level rise.
Oh yeah, everyone's seen that photo of the polar bear on that little tiny
Uh-huh.
patch of ice. Yeah.
And the monarch butterfly being that of GMOs.
Yeah.
I think forest fires are the same thing for climate change in general.
Forest fires are one of the few times where mainstream audiences are exposed to, undoubtable climate change.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, it's a natural ecosystem occurrence, but when it's on the scale that it's a fire was like inches away from destroying South Tahoe,
Yeah.
the
It's
Caldor
one
fire
thing
a
if,
few months ago.
fires are natural. Forest fires happen everywhere. In fact, some species have adapted to it, like acacias that need heat in order for their seeds to grow. But
Mhm.
when you're destroying established trees that have survived many forest fires before that point,
Something's wrong.
that shows that you're having more severe effects that were not intended.
Yeah, when it's a single fire burns through 1 million acres of forest and can easily be seen like very obviously from space, something's afoot, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
All right, any shout outs before we go?
Shout out to, let's see. I think that Midwest No Coast hat, I might have to get one of those.
My shout out, we definitely should get the
Yeah.
poster. My shout out definitely goes to Spotify for being impossible to put a podcast on.
Oh my god, really?
I'm trying to figure it out, and so Spotify doesn't host podcasts directly. You need to have a distributing link that just keeps MP3s. And so I'm like, okay, so I need to convert all of these episodes into MP3s. And then I have yet to find a hosting service that is free.
That's as
Yep.
we're introducing podcast format, I hope you all have enjoyed the really good visual aids that we provided. Podcast format might require some creative liberties.
Yeah, I mean, I try to put work into these slides to make things, make things flow and to have slide notes. But at the same time, I've gotten the inspiration of slide-based podcasts when I started this. And
Yeah.
they also have stuff on like Apple and Spotify. It's the same exact thing. It's just an MP3 format. And they say, if you want the slides, just watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that as we're going on, it's getting to the point where you don't have to have the slides on. We're kind of just describing what's going on enough. But
Yeah, things are happening, and it's I know exactly what you're talking about. I've tuned into podcasts before, and they've just been mentioning the chart or the graph, and
mhm.
Interpretation is allowed there for what exactly the graph might say, but they're going to describe it too.
Yeah, I was gonna do it this week, but I spent an hour on it. I'm not gonna do this for now. I'm not in the mood.
Oh, no
Apple
worries.
Podcast is gonna happen because they actually host podcasts. It's like $20 a year, and I think I'm at the point where I'm willing to make that investment.
Yeah, of course that's going to be a split, but
Of course. All right, and of course we don't monetize our videos, and we don't do a Patreon, and we won't. But freaking Universal Music Group, Universal Music Group, the people that's the label for the song that's the intro and outro song, they copyright strike the videos.
yeah,
And I literally added a member of the band on Twitter and said, hey, can I use this song as a podcast? I'm not making any money. I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And fucking I emailed UMG, and they're like, the band members are not the copyright holders of the song. We are.
that does happen. Copyright is a very hairy
That's so
area of
stupid.
law.
I can't see how you want to be a patent attorney, my guy.
Oh, I love semantics. You know it.
Oh, yeah, it's a mess. I got so their deal is that they're letting me run the thing, but YouTube runs ads on a video whether it's monetized or not, and the money just goes directly to them. So then the money goes to UMG.
Yeah.
We love you, YouTube. Don't ever change.
Yeah, don't ever change YouTube. You're getting rid of dislikes, but we still love you,
Emphasis
Just
on your
saying.
back.
We do.
The point of
All right.
contention is how they
See ya.
act. Where you draw the line will set you free. The debate is over.